Floating fingerboards with adjustable string action and detachable necks, mechanical tuners, pristine sound and sleek design, 10-string guitars, terz guitars, even microtonal guitars with movable frets. We have arrived in the 19th century, the golden age of the guitar, a peak of innovation and craftsmanship, and the culmination of the romantic guitar. In the previous video, we looked at the very early history of the guitar while featuring one of the first 6-string guitars ever built. In this video, we will follow the continued development of the guitar throughout the period known as its Golden Age, while featuring an instrument from one of the last great builders in the Romantic tradition. The so-called Golden Age of the guitar saw its popularity increase rapidly, spanning all social classes and across all of Europe and into the Americas. One writer at that time said that there is a perfect craze for the guitar that threatens to drive the pianoforte from the field. Another contemporary in 1828 wrote, "There is a guitaromanie, or guitar mania." No doubt its popularity is in no small part assisted by its portability and affordability. It was a period of flourishing creativity, with countless impressive compositions penned by virtuoso guitarist-composers. Parallel to the musical development, the instrument itself seems to have been in a constant state of innovation. Great instrument builders from all across Europe put their hand to the guitar, lending their talents to its innovation. And we find national variants with leading names connected to each country. In France, Lacotte. In Italy, Fabbricatore, Guadagnini. In Spain, Pages. And in Vienna, we find the master Johann Georg Stauffer. England is notable for the great influx of guitar builders that emigrated there from all over Europe. Panormo perhaps being the most famous. In general, there is a great variety in romantic guitars, sizes, dimensions, scale, as well as in construction, such as inner bracing. It is also clear that many instruments were custom built according to specific dimensions. This is in stark contrast to the violin making tradition, where the shape and basic features have remained fairly standardized from quite early on. Vienna at that time was a veritable hotspot for music, particularly instrumental music, and many of the great Italian guitar virtuosi fled opera-dominated Italy to find more favorable audiences there, such as Mauro Giuliani and Luigi Legnani, two of the great legends of the guitar in the 19th century. Particularly in Vienna, there were a number of different guitars that achieved popularity. Foremost among them was the terz guitar. The terz guitar is tuned a minor third higher than the standard guitar, with a significantly shorter string length, commonly ranging from 53 to 56 centimeters. But despite its smaller size, it boasts a unique power and projection with an unparalleled crystalline purity of sound. It was not a seldom used rarity, but was in fact the standard guitar of choice in ensemble settings, and the first guitar in the vast repertoire of music for two guitars. also find the common use of guitars with an extended bass range reaching up to 10 strings, so-called harp guitars. Often the bass strings were strung along a second neck. There was the decachord built by Lecoq and used by Carulli, as well as the harpolire, among others. Eventually, the contraguitar, or so-called Schrammel guitar, would extend to 15 strings, developed by Johann Gottfried Scherzer from earlier models of his teacher and mentor, Johann Georg Stauffer. The Wappengitarre, or coat of arms guitar, was also very popular. Here I have mentioned only a few of the guitar designs that achieved great success and popularity, but in fact there were so many innovations and experiments. As playing technique continued to soar to new heights, guitar builders continued to innovate and perfect their instruments to keep up with the level of excellence. Perhaps some of the most distinct innovations were pioneered by the Viennese luthier Johann Georg Stauffer, whose many inventions contributed to his unique instruments establishing a heritage, often just referred to as the Stauffer tradition or Viennese tradition. I have here a guitar from one of the last great builders in that tradition. This guitar was built in Vienna by Ludwig Reisinger at the turn of the 20th century, perhaps a decade or two into it. Yes, romantic guitars were still being built in the 20th century. We see many of the features that Stauffer pioneered in this guitar. Here we see a floating fingerboard, not attached to the body. It extends beyond the sound hole, increasing the range of the instrument, often extending as far as 23 frets. The neck is also entirely detachable, presumably to reduce its size for increased portability. It is an extremely simple mechanism consisting of a single bolt, which is operated with a clock key. But what is more ingenious and of greater interest to the performer is that this makes the action adjustable. Action refers to the distance between the string and the fingerboard. Too high and the instrument is difficult to play. Too low and you may have buzzes and less than ideal projection. With a simple twist of the key, one can raise or lower the action of the instrument to the preference of the player. This guitar actually has two necks. One according to the dimensions of the original romantic guitar, with a nut width of 4.4, significantly smaller than the other, which is more in the fashion of a modern guitar with a nut width of 5 centimeters. 4.4 nut can be quite slender for the modern guitarist, and if one is not consistently playing on such an instrument, it can be difficult to switch between a modern guitar and the romantic guitar. So having that extra neck really does come in handy. Stauffer is also credited with being the inventor of mechanical tuners as we know them today, the worm and gear tuner. We see them on his instruments in the unique headstock of his creation, known as the Persian slipper. Scroll-shaped, all the worm gears are encased within a plate, and the machine tuners are lined along one side of the headstock. These so-called inline tuners are still the standard used on most electric guitars. It is known that many of these developments were guided or assisted by the supreme virtuoso of the guitar, Luigi Legnani, who was also credited as a luthier. Many of Stauffer's instruments, as well as this one, are labeled after the model of Luigi Legnani. Stauffer actually began his career building guitars in the Italian style, which was probably brought to Vienna by such great guitarists from Italy as Giuliani and Legnani around 1805. At that time, the Italian and Viennese model were almost indistinguishable. The model later designed by Legnani and built by Stauffer is quite different to preceding guitars. The design and shape was quickly copied nearly everywhere, including abroad, in France and England. A true inventor, Stauffer was apparently more interested in pursuing his ideas and innovations than lucrative profit margins. He died impoverished. Nevertheless, he became the patriarch of a great lineage. Firstly, his son Anton Stauffer carried on the tradition. Other names: Anton Fischer, Feilenreiter, Enzensperger, and most famously his student C.F. Martin, who would move to America and pioneer the great American guitar tradition. And of course Ludwig Reisinger, who built this guitar. In a way, he is the culmination and final step in this tradition, before the onset and dominance of the Spanish guitar as fashioned after perhaps the most famous luthier in guitar history, Antonio de Torres. As the tides of taste flowed away from Vienna and Western Europe as a whole, the Spanish guitar in the style of Torres took over. The romantic guitar gradually gave way to this new instrument. Larger dimensions, fan bracing back to the tie-on bridge as opposed to pegs. This became the standard guitar played by the master guitarists of the next generation: Arcas, Tárrega, Manjon, Jobet. The extraordinary flood of innovation that took place during the 19th century had dwindled to a trickle, and standardization took over. Although this is only a brief glimpse of the guitar, its history and construction, it would not be complete without mentioning the German luthier Hermann Hauser, the superlative builder of the modern guitar, whose instruments tout the highest prices in history. Hermann Hauser was a product of the Romantic guitar tradition and fashioned his early instruments in that style. He was particularly focused, building in the Stauffer style, for quite some time. That all changed when the great guitarist Jobet visited his workshop with a Torres in hand. Hauser took the opportunity and studied the instrument, and the history of the guitar would be changed forever. Later, Segovia would repeat the incident with his Ramirez as constructed by Santos Hernandez. From this began several years of collaboration and research between Segovia and Hauser, until finally the result emerged. That guitar is now called the guitar of the century. For nearly a century now, the great works of the 19th century have been commonly performed on an instrument that not only did not exist, but in many ways is antithetical in style, aesthetics, articulation, and sound to the period. Here I have my modern concert guitar from Paulino Bernabe. I wouldn't want to perform this type of modern music on a 19th century guitar. But now, having laid my hands on authentic 19th century instruments, I no longer want to play romantic repertoire on a modern instrument either.